going on, everyone? Hunter Dooley here from Philly Insider. Got Drew with me here. Talk some Phillies today, doing our weekly episode, and kind of just itching to get to opening day at this point, I think, Drew. I mean, I think we were texting about it. There's not a ton to talk about, so we're kind of just bringing up different topics at this point that we can talk about each week, and we're ready to get some actual game action to talk about, some actual storylines developing throughout the season to talk about, because we can talk about spring training storylines all we want, but I mean, there's only so much you can take away from these games. So, Drew, how we feeling? Talking about spring a little bit. How we feeling about what has happened so far in spring?
Definitely feeling pretty good about the pitching. It seems like pretty much everybody's still kind of on the track that you want them to be on. I believe we're going to see a bunch of the big guys tomorrow, like Alvarado and Sir Anthony and Soto. So I'll actually get to see them for once. I think the last few times they've been out, I haven't really got to see anything. So that'll be nice to have. But I'm definitely ready for the season to start. Spring training kind of gets like repetitive after a while. You see the starters for like 6 innings and then they're gone. So
yeah, maybe not even.
Yeah, it can be pretty brutal to try to hang on and watch every game if you have the time to do that.
Right.
But yeah, I'm definitely ready for the season though. I think along with everybody else.
Yeah, it's about time. I mean, I think we talked about it too. Like after the first couple of weeks of spring training, it's just all right. When's opening day happening? Like how many days until opening day? And this concludes another week, so that means we're another week closer to opening day, which is nice on the 28th. And what day is it today? It's the 8th, so we're 20 days away. We're getting there. But with that said, I mean, any spring training storylines you wanted to talk about before we kind of get into our main topic here? I did want to bring up one thing to you, and it's not a spring storyline, but I wanted to ask what you thought of the right field out-of-town scoreboard that has now been converted into a digital scoreboard. I did love the out-of-town scoreboard. I thought it was one of the coolest things, and I am a little bit upset that it is leaving. However, seeing the way it looked like from the pictures and everything with it actually on and with the pictures and everything and the pitching matchup, I actually thought it looked pretty cool. I know it's going to be a little bit different. You know, you get rid of a little bit of that old school feel, even though CBP is not an old park. That was something that was cool about it. I think it looks kind of cool.
Yeah. My opinion on it was like kind of like yours, like the sentimental value of the old one, like where it was like that classic look. I don't believe it ever changed since they built CBP back in like 2004, right?
Yeah, I think it's been the same the whole time.
Yeah, but I think it's kind of like how, not exactly because it's a lot older park, but Fenway is like kind of like classic because they do the manual scoreboards, which is kind of cool.
I'm in Wrigley.
Yeah, it's definitely like a nostalgia type thing where everything's not digital.
Yeah.
I don't know. I don't think Fenway has gone away from that, right? They still do
I don't believe so, no.
The full manual out of town.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure when I was at Wrigley a year or two ago, too, it was still the same for them as well.
Yeah, so I think there's some kind of like, I mean, obviously the Phillies wasn't manual, but it was partially. But I think like the new one looks fine, but were those bricks in between the screens real?
I didn't like take a close enough look. I don't know if I saw that specific picture actually.
Okay. Well, it looked like there was bricks in between the screens, and if that's true, then that's kind of like it's kind of out of place. Like there's not really bricks anywhere else other than center field, like the batter's eye. Yeah. So I don't know. I think it looks fine. It'll do a lot better job, I'm sure, than what the old one did as far as functionality. But I don't know. I kind of like the old one, just the classic look of it.
Yeah. No, that's fair. And there was a few like odd parts of it where you wouldn't know like which number meant like the hitter, the batter, or what exactly it meant. But like once you actually figured it out, it looked pretty cool. But that being said, I thought it was nice to have it there. But I want to shout out Ben too. Ben always watches our videos, even the replays, and finally got him here live. So thank you for tuning in, Ben. We're going to be talking about question marks, concerns for the Phillies heading into 2024. So drop any questions you got, Ben, or any concerns you have as well on the roster. And Star Wars, welcome in. Good to see you in here, a loyal listener. Thank you guys for tuning in tonight on a Friday night. So anything you want to touch on from spring, Drew? I mean, Aramis Garcia continues to be a league MVP, as we all expected, but that's pretty much all I got, to be honest.
Yeah, my biggest storyline is definitely like the last outfield spot. I think a lot of guys are playing well, trying to compete for it, like David Dahl, Pache, and I think Caves actually had a pretty good spring, but he's kind of like a quad A hitter, as we kind of learned. So I don't really look too much into that. But David Dahl, it seems like he's really hitting well. I haven't got to see him at all, but just based on the score sheets and the box scores, I think he's putting up a fight, no doubt about it.
Yeah, it's always interesting with those spots. I mean, those guys, they go from playing every day in spring and earning that spot to then being asked to come off the bench and be a pinch hitter by the time the regular season rolls around. So it's always tricky to figure out who can do that best. And I think if you're going from that perspective, you might go with Apache just because he did it last year. I know Cave did, but I feel like when Cave played for the Phillies, it was more as a starter. And obviously, like you said, we've talked about him as a quad A type of guy. And David Dahl, like you said, I also haven't really watched him. I don't even think I've seen the highlights of him, to be quite honest.
No.
I just know he's been hitting a couple bombs here and there, has an RBI single here and there. Like, he's definitely popping out on the box score right now. And that's what you wanted to see from him. And I don't know. He would definitely be interesting. He has kind of an edge in that he is a left-handed bat. So if they want to add a left-handed bat, that could get him a spot.
Yep. Speaking of popping out on the stat sheet, let me pull up the one from today. I know one in particular player had a huge day.
Oh yeah,
you might know him. He's our second baseman. He went 2 for 3 with 4 RBIs and a home run. So that's a good day for Bryson Stott. I mean, he's kind of last couple times he's been out, I believe he's kind of coming around a little bit. And JT went 3 for 3. So you absolutely love to see that.
Yeah. And never forget, Ethan puts the lyrics of A-OK in here. In the words of Drew, never forget, I won't call him out specifically, but one of our known subscribers, friend of Drew, did not think this was necessarily a great walk-up song. So shout out, you know who you are, but just wanted to bring that up. And Ben says he loves that song. And yeah, I mean, I'm with Ben. I would prefer having Pache in that spot just because of the upside and the youth and the defensive ability. But I could see the reasons why they would maybe opt for a David Dahl or someone else. But anything else you wanted to touch on from spring before we kind of get to some of our question marks and concerns going into this year, Drew?
No, I think I kind of covered what I wanted to cover there as far as storylines.
Okay, yeah, we'll go for it. Start us off. I got some concerns, but I want to hear yours first. And whatever order you want to go in, if you want to go from your biggest concerns to the least of your concerns, go for it.
I would say I'll go from the least to the biggest. My least big concern would be JT's continued regression or bad play, because he's a stalwart in our lineup. I mean, he's in there 135 times a year. That is it's massive if he can come back and have another great year like he did in 2021 when he was 6th in MVP voting, I believe. So I think getting JT back on the right track this year is definitely a big deal for this team, and definitely a big part of where they're going to go in the postseason, because you can't just have a hole in your lineup at catcher like a lot of teams do and be a winning team.
100%. No, I think you hit the nail on the head with that one. How JT performs in the regular season is, again, I think I talked about it. Like I said, he's not the engine, but I think the offense can go as he goes, especially during certain hot streaks as the regular season goes along. If he can have a hot streak or a couple hot streaks, that could power the offense to a 4 or 5 game win streak here and there. And that's what separates you from the rest of the pack, is those surges you have, because you're going to have moments where you're not playing as well, but as long as you weather the storm in those spots, it's not going to be a huge deal. And when you're winning, you need to capitalize on those and continue to play well. So JT is one of those guys who can spark something like that. And as you mentioned, at the catcher position, that's a premium position. That's not a position where you're getting a lot of talent around the league. That's why Garrett Stubbs is your backup catcher, because there's not a lot of backup talent at that position either. And he is cheap, and there's reasons for that. But point being, JT is a really important, him fixing that hole in his swing. If that proves to be true once we get to the regular season, as we saw him today, pulls a high and in sinker to left field for a nice RBI single. And shout out Trey for wreaking havoc on the base paths before that too, to get in position. That's something you like to say. But JT, I think, is a really crucial factor in the 2024 season. I don't think that can be overstated enough.
Yeah. And if you think about it, kind of like this kind of just backs up my point from a little bit ago. If you think about the top 4 teams in the NL, I would say it's probably the Dodgers, Braves, us, and probably the Diamondbacks, right?
Mm-hmm.
All of them have good catchers, all 4 of them.
Yep.
And the best team in the AL from last year has the best catcher. So I think it's just it's crucial to have a good catcher on your team whenever you're trying to compete for a championship. I mean, it's so important. I don't really know how else to say it.
Yeah, no, I think you said it well. And I mean, unless you're the Astros and you can just have Martin Maldonado play catcher, which he's amazing defensively, but obviously he can't hit or run at all. I mean, they had an unbelievable rest of their lineup and an unbelievable pitching staff. So his offensive impact didn't necessarily matter as much that year. That's a rare exception, right? You know, you're looking at a lot of the playoff teams in recent years and teams who have won it all. You know, you need good catching behind the plate to get there, and it's really important. And even if they can't hit, they need to be like Maldonado. He was one of the leaders in pop time for, you know, near the top of the leaderboard in pop time for a number of years. You needed a guy like that, and he needs to be exceptional at everything else if he can't hit. So to have a guy like JT who has all the tools to be a great catcher, offensively, defensively, I think that's really important when you have a guy like that behind the dish. So, yeah, I mean, I'm very excited about him this upcoming year, and I think he's going to have. I think he's going to have a bounce back year because I know some people will say not that last year wasn't necessarily like a super down year, but I thought it was, and I think next year he's going to have this upcoming year. I think he's going to have probably, I think he's going to hit around 275, being an 800 OPS guy. Like, I think he's going to be right in that ballpark once again that we expect him to be, even at his age.
Yeah, I'm kind of right there with you. I'm bullish on JT this year, definitely. My worry about him is not because I think he's going to play bad, but it's just a worry of the team in general, like how it would affect them. So
Sure.
I think, like you said, he's going to hit probably around an 800 OPS. He's going to steal 20, 30 bases, hit 20 home runs. I mean, there's not a lot of catchers that do that. It's very valuable for the Phillies to have a guy like that, for sure.
It's kind of crazy to think about, but and yeah, to your point, as far as the worry goes, like, you know, we're still in spring training, so we don't know how it's going to translate yet. That fixing that hole in the swing, we still have to see how that translates. And as you mentioned, the past couple of years, you have seen some regression from him, and there was concern that he was going to continue to slide this year, and that was going to hurt the Phillies lineup. And again, we had that big hole at the number 4 spot last year at certain points, and especially in the playoffs, Bohm did not necessarily fill that role, which we can talk about another time. But still love Bohm, no diss at him. It's just, you know, you would have liked if a guy like JT could have stepped up in that role last year. But I get it. It's asking a lot of a catcher. He has a lot to do. And he has, like I said, he contributes a lot. So that's another thing on his plate. But I think we're both excited about his year coming up. So I'll go into my first concern, which is the least of my concerns. And it's not so much because of the player. It's more so because I feel good about the rest of the bullpens, where even if this player doesn't pitch very well, I still think the Phillies will be okay. And that is Gregory Soto. I'm a little bit concerned about him. Now, I say this, he comes off today where he struck out the side and got all 3 outs pretty easily. So that's what I want to see from him. But I also saw in the outings before that, he was giving up hard contact. Me and Drew were watching one of his outings together where a ball was just scorched up the middle, and that probably wasn't even the hardest baseball that was hit off of him this spring so far. And that's what we saw from him last year was, I guess his fastball is just kind of flat. Maybe that's the reasoning, because other than that, man, you look at all his metrics, his advanced data, all his just stuff plus. I mean, he's got a really good arsenal of pitches, and it's just a couple, but I mean, both of them should play very well if all is going well. So I don't know if it's just they need to figure out something with the fastball and needs to throw the sinker a little bit more. I think he throws a sinker as well. But point being, I think you're looking at a pitcher who's coming into Philadelphia with a similar makeup to Alvarado, which we've talked about before. And you're hoping that the same thing is going to happen to where he had a little bit of a rough start of it with the Phillies, like Alvarado, and then figured it out. Let's hope we don't have to use that minor league option or get to that point this year. That would be pretty discouraging. But I think if Gregory Soto pitches well and the rest of the bullpen kind of performs to expectations, I think you're looking at a really strong year. So that's why it's one of my concerns, just because if he doesn't pitch well and then you have an injury or two or a couple other guys don't perform as well as you're hoping to, then you're in a really tough spot to where you have guys who, yes, I don't think they're going to be in a spot where they have no one they can rely on in the bullpen, but you need to get through the season too. It's not just about Soto performing in the playoffs. You need guys to get you through the regular season, and he needs to be that for you this year.
Yeah, I think that's a very valid concern considering what he showed us here in the spring. And he's obviously, if he turns it around and pitches well the whole season, he's going to completely like elevate this bullpen, because last year he never really reached that potential that you kind of were talking about. And I mean, like you said about his fastball, I think it's kind of flat. I I was kind of like concerned with his slider last year as well. Like I feel like sometimes he just had no idea where it was going. And I'm surprised the Phillies haven't tried to get him throwing a cutter, kind of similar to Alvarado,
Right.
because I think that could be a really good pitch for him if he could do it. I mean, maybe they've already tried and he's not comfortable with it, but I think that would really be a pitch that could elevate his game to another level because I think Alvarado has a lot better feel for that than he ever did as other secondary pitches that he used to have. I'm Alvarado used to throw a slider, I believe, but maybe I'm wrong. And he never really had any idea where it was going. And his cutter, it seems like he has comfort throwing it in the zone. So I think if you could get Soto into that kind of groove with either a slider or maybe a cutter, I think that would be a big thing for him to kind of like leap forward into a bigger role.
To your point, I feel like every time Alvarado throws that cutter, it's always low and into righties, and not always, but if he wants to put it there, he's going to be able to put it there. Which with
Yeah.
Soto, I didn't feel like he was able to put any pitch where he really wanted to put it last year. And again, with the velocity he has and with the stuff he has, you should be able to get away with that from time to time, and a good bit of the time, honestly. I mean, we saw Alvarado get away with that a number of times, even when he was still kind of getting his feet under him and started to pitch better too. But you do need to be able to locate from time to time and change eye level and go east to west as well. Like that's part of it too. You don't need to have perfect command, but you need to at least get it in the vicinity of where the spot you're trying to hit sometimes too. So yeah, I don't know. It'll be interesting. I think I agree with you. His slider last year was also a concern. Honestly, like every pitch he threw was a concern, but yeah, the slider was not necessarily like something to write home about last year either. I think the movement was still there, obviously. Like his pitches still move well, still throws them in high velo, as I mentioned, but yeah, I don't know. With him, it's just interesting. Again, I've said this before. I think he is definitely a lefty specialist at the least. I think he can do that for you. But again, this is a guy who was an all-star in Detroit, and I understand that Detroit they had to send an all-star and they had to have someone represent them. And I also know that he did put runners on base there, but he also got out of those situations a number of times. I don't know. Maybe the market is different there, and maybe that's part of the issue. I'm not sure, but I certainly think he can bounce back this year. It's just a matter of what version of him we see on a consistent basis. Because last year it was just so inconsistent from game to game.
Yeah, I like, albeit from the other side of the plate, but Spencer Strider has a very similar pitch arsenal to Gregory Soto as far as movement and velocity because Strider obviously commands it very well most of the time, but last year he was mostly a two-pitch pitcher and it worked out for him being a starting pitcher. So I think being a two-pitch pitcher definitely isn't Soto's problem, but if you can't locate either of those pitches, then it's your problem because kind of saw it with Kimbrel last year in the playoffs. Like he could not locate his fastball at all. So people were just sitting on the knuckle curve and it bit him bad in the playoffs. And the Diamondbacks absolutely shelled him every time they saw him basically.
Mm-hmm.
And another thing with Soto actually that I wanted to bring up was that minor league option that he has. It could kind of be like an Alvarado type situation where they send him down and he figures something out, whether it's mentally or physically. Like Alvarado, I believe he talked with like a psychiatrist or something in the minor leagues, and that's kind of what really brought him back to being what he is now. So I think you might be able to see that come from his option if they end up using it.
Definitely. Yeah. No, I don't have anything else on Soto, so feel free to go into your second concern or question mark.
Okay. My second biggest concern would probably be Castellanos kind of like having a downfall from what he was last year. And I think kind of similar to JT, like he's in that lineup every game, basically. And if you have a black hole there, which Castellanos isn't going to be getting benched, I don't think. So if he's not playing well, it's going to be very, very hard for the Phillies to do anything major in the playoffs specifically because you can just kind of attack the other guys around him and not have to worry about him. And last year you saw it in the NLCS. He went over. I think he was over 21. And it just we didn't score any runs the entire back half of the series.
It's actually my second concern too. So I mean, we can just piggyback off of each other.
Okay.
I was thinking about it today, and I was like, I don't want to. We've talked about Rojas so much on the podcast, and I feel like that's known at this point. Like, I don't want to like it is a question mark, but I feel like that's such a big one. I didn't want to go into that because again, we've talked about that so many times in the podcast now at this point over the past 5-6 weeks. So I was like, who else? Like, who's like a really important factor? Because even if Rojas doesn't hit, there are alternatives. I think there's things we can figure out. But Castellanos, you're still locked down to that contract. And after this year, it becomes a little more tradable since there's only 2 more years. Or no, actually, oh yeah, there are only 2 more years on it after this year. Yeah, he is in his third year this year. Point being, though, it's not going to be very tradable if he has a slightly like if he kind of has something in between what he had last year and the year before, there's still not going to be much interest. Like, ideally, he just plays well so that one, his value is up if you did decide to trade him if he didn't perform well in the postseason again, or he just performs well enough to where you don't want to trade him again, right? I'm not really concerned as much with the fielding at this point. Like, that is what it is, and he got better last year too. I think we saw a noticeable improvement. He's better. They moved him more to right center field. That's worked for him. And with Rojas and Marsh out there for at least the start of the season, yeah, I really don't think that's a concern at all, especially with just Rojas roaming over there. I think they're going to be fine as far as outfield defense goes. But again, you need depth in the lineup, and you need your 5 or 6 hitter. I know Stott's probably going to hit 5, but you need your 6 or 7 hitter to do some damage from time to time. Like, you can't have that bottom of the order, like, pitching staffs just go, all right, well, let's just get to Castellanos and then we feel fine because we know he's just going to chase out its zone. Can't be the case, because then you're going to get Stott up in some situations, and then they're going to stop pitching to him because they don't want to waste the pitch count. And then Castellanos is going to have to come up. And, maybe JT playing better too fixes that problem, and him fixing that hole in the swing. Maybe that does. I don't know. But Castellanos, I think, is like, again, that's the guy that kind of completes the lineup to me. And having him towards the bottom of the order, but not at the very bottom, it still makes them a really, really potent force as an offense.
Yeah, I think you kind of hit the nail on the head there as far as like his, like, I don't know how to explain it really, but like I agree with everything you said basically.
Mm-hmm.
But I think you kind of saw it today. He was hitting, I think, 7th in the lineup. So I don't know if that kind of speaks to how they feel about him, but JT was hitting 4th, and we kind of went, like we talked about JT earlier. If he has a big season, if he's hitting 4th, I mean, there's a chance he could have 100 RBI as a catcher, which doesn't happen very often. Yeah. I think the most recent one might have been Salvador Perez a couple years ago, but
yeah,
it only happens once every few years at least. But I think Castellanos, I think he's probably going to have a pretty decent year, but one of my biggest concerns is definitely him having his downfall and chasing out of the zone way too much. And I mean, this spring he's only hitting 133, so that isn't an ideal sign. Sure. But it's just this third week of spring, so I'm not going to look into it too much.
He didn't.
But I think
he didn't hit well in spring last year, to be honest, either. But
right, and like you said, hitting behind Stott, it's like Stott works at bats. He takes, I think it's like 5 pitches in at bat, right? Mm-hmm. Or something like that.
Yeah, 4.1, I think it was last year. So
yeah, like if we're having like a big inning and somebody goes through, Harper, JT, Stott, Bohm to get to Castellanos, you don't want him out there just flailing at anything that comes across the plate. And I think if he has a bad year, he's gonna be that. He's gonna be just absolutely brutal sometimes. He's gonna strike out on 3 pitches that aren't even in the zone. Yeah. And I would hate to see that happen, but I could definitely see it happening because of what we saw in 2022 from him. So I definitely hope it doesn't happen, but that's definitely one of my biggest concerns along with you, I guess.
Right. And even last year we saw with him improving a little bit in that regard. I mean, I think part of it was he was just up there thinking, all right, well, I just got to watch some of these pitches just in case. Like, I'm not even going to make the conscious like it's not even a thing of like, all right, I'm seeing it come in and then I'm not swinging at it. It's just kind of, I don't want to say he made up his mind before the pitch, but there were times where he struck out on a fastball and I'm like, okay, maybe he was just kind of hoping that was going to be a slider so that pitchers could think, oh, maybe he is going to lay off of it this year. And I don't know. Like, I don't want to say it was a guessing game for him up there a lot of the time, but it did feel similar to that to me. Like, at least for me watching it, I felt that some of the time. So I certainly hope that wasn't the case. And again, I'm sure there's an element of that to every major league at bat, right? It's not easy going up there hitting Spencer Strider, who's got, 4 or 5 pitches, and they all play tremendously, especially the fastball and slider. Like, it's not easy going up there against today's new generation of pitchers and even the older guys too. But point being, though, you just can't have that happening again with Castellanos. Let's just hope it doesn't get to that point this year. And Ben says, I'd love to see Castellanos strike out looking more, which is such like it's kind of a sad thing to have to like say that about a player. Seeing him swing at a slider 50 feet outside triggers immediate nausea for me. Yeah. And I mean, we're with you, Ben. It was infuriating. I think it was the one home run he had in the NLCS in game 1. I think that was his only hit in that series. And I believe Rojas had more hits than him in that series too, which is crazy. Again, we've talked about this a lot. Castellanos got us to that series. Like, we don't win the NLDS without him. That's not even a question in my mind. But it doesn't matter if we ultimately lose. I don't want to say all because of him, but he was a big part of that lineup's downfall in that series, in my opinion.
Yeah, I think him and Bohm actually. Yes. I don't think either of them had a hit in that series.
Bohm had
in the second half of the series, I should say.
Bohm had the home run in game 7, but I think that was it.
Okay. Well, I think those two were pretty much the major reason that we ultimately did not score a lot of runs. And I think you kind of don't hold it against Bohm because, I mean, he came through for you all year.
Yes.
He was one of the main reasons you were in the playoffs in the first place. So sure. I don't think we worry about him in the same way that we worry about Castellanos. But Castellanos, you got to be better in the postseason, man. I mean, I know you were great in the NLDS against the Braves. I mean, you were hitting everything out of the park, but I don't know. You got to be more consistent throughout the whole playoffs because every game counts, not just the NLDS. You know, yeah. I know slumps happen, and it is what it is at this point. We're moving on to this year, but I would love to have him have a great year this year, and I think that would be, like we said in the last podcast, the division could be close, but it would be a lot closer if a guy like Castellanos has another MVP type season.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. And I think you saw it in September last year. Castellanos had a really good month of September to help us get back to the postseason and clinch a playoff spot with a week left of games too. And we're all rooting for him too. He can be frustrating at times, but he embodies the city in so many ways when he's playing well. And just by the attitude he has, he's a great quote when he's playing well too. Like, people want him to play well. And I think he is such a Philly athlete that I really do want him to just really put those concerns aside these next 3 years of the contract and just go, man. Like, I don't even need you to be Cincinnati MVP for him. Just honestly, if you just marginally improve off of last year too, I'll take that. Like, I think if he does that, I would feel much better about him going into the years beyond and going into the postseason even too. It's just incremental improvements. That's all we're asking for. So, yeah, like Ben said, he's also a great quote when he's playing well too. But I mean, I guess that depends on how you define great. I think I'm back now, but
yeah, I think you are.
I think I lost connection for a hot second there. Am I good now?
Yep, you are. You are good. I thought I lost you. Like, I thought I was the one that was disconnected. Oh, I think we might have lost him.
Yeah, I'm back now.
You're back.
I'm good now. But I was going to say too, like, I guess it depends on how you define great in terms of a great quote. I mean, it makes for interesting content when him and Jim Salisbury are going back and forth, and he's not very happy with Salisbury that one year, 2022. But
Salisbury knew what he was doing.
He did. Point being, I think he is a Philly athlete for sure, and I would like to see him. I would like to see him turn it around this year, but whether that happens or not, that remains to be seen. So I'm going to go into my third concern here, or / question mark. And it's a guy who's actually on the mound tomorrow for spring training, which is Taijuan Walker. Did have his moments last year. He did have some good starts. I think he started off the year rough, had like a middle period where he was pitching really well in the season, and then didn't really finish the season very well. And we signed him, obviously another guy. We signed him to a pretty big deal when he got here. I think he's making $18 million a year, if I'm not mistaken, 4 for 72. And that is kind of what 3 and 4s are getting these days in the market. I mean, you just saw Zach Wheeler get 42 a year. So that tells you what you need to know about the pitching market. Obviously, those guys are getting paid. But I would like Taijuan Walker to pitch well enough to where we're not going into next offseason saying, all right, well, this is still a guy we're thinking about trading, especially now that he's done 2 years of his contract. Maybe he's more tradable now. And I don't doubt that if they had landed Yamamoto, which was very unlikely from the get-go, but if they had landed him, I don't doubt they probably would have tried to trade him. I think they maybe would have just found a destination for him. I'm not saying they would have taken anything, but I think they would have tried to move him. I don't know. But last year, again, we talked about this. You would hope something was up with him injury-wise. I don't know exactly what happened with him with the velo, but it sounds like they did try to make some adjustments heading into spring this year so that his velo doesn't start out low. It was such a weird thing to me because the games, the first few innings, he would start off at low velo, but then by inning 7 or 6, his velo is fine. I don't know why that was. It was a really awkward, not awkward, but like really weird situation. And I just don't know what was going on there. So I'm hoping he turns it around this year. For obvious reasons, I think that fixes a lot of problems for the Phillies too. And you're not looking at trying to add another starter at that point, because I feel good about Sanchez as the 5th guy. I don't have any concerns there right now, to be honest. We're going to see how he does, but I feel like he has a really good chance to do something similar to what he did last year. As far as Taijuan goes, though, I need him to not only perform, but I need to see him perform in the second half and have that longevity. So maybe if you get an Abel up here, or you get someone else, you can by the rotation some innings too throughout the year and go 6-man for a couple of weeks. I know Wheeler's not a huge fan of that, but that might help a guy like Walker too to limit those innings a little bit. But I think for Walker, it's really just early in games pitching well and not having the velo issues, and then late in the season pitching well enough to where we can trust him to pitch in a playoff start. Because the thing for Taijuan too, like obviously he's going into this year with a chip on his shoulder, but people also don't realize the guy's only started 1 playoff game and he gave up 4 runs in that one. And it was with the D-backs, I think, in 2017, 2018. That guy, I bet, is itching to have a playoff start. I know it. Like, I know he wants to compete. And I think he is like a really strong competitor. I don't doubt that about him. But I just don't know what the surefire fix is for him.
Yeah. I'm kind of I agree with what you say in there. Like, as far as concerns for him not being what you want him to be, because like you said, it's a big thing. Like, it's a big part of what you want to do in the regular season, having 5 good starting pitchers, because you can win a lot of games if you have 5 good starting pitchers.
Yes.
And like, beyond the Phillies starting 5, their rotation depth isn't great. I mean, it's definitely a lot better than it's been in years past. Like, Spencer Turnbull is fine depth, and
yes,
that's great to have him, because if Taijuan, would get hurt, which he has an injury history, I would hate to see it happen, but it's very possible, because I mean, Rangers never stayed healthy for a full season either. So, but
right.
I think Taijuan using his splitter more last year definitely helped him at times,
100%.
because it really gets guys off of his fastball, because his fastball velo drastically fell last year at that one point, like you were talking about. And I think that's keeping his fastball velocity around 95 is going to be a big key for him this year, because when you lose a couple ticks on your fastball, you lose a couple ticks on everything else too.
Yes.
And everything kind of plays down, and it makes a hitter like a lot more aware of what's coming. I don't know why, but it just gives them a completely different look. And I think it changes the spin rate and stuff a lot on your fastball as well, which helps with movement or whatever else it may be. But I think he definitely, I'm concerned for him this year. Like, he's one of my biggest concerns. I mean, that wasn't my last one, but I think that's kind of just an obvious one. That's why I went away from it. I went for like a little bit more subtle one. But I mean, there's real concern for him because of what he did in the back half of last year. I mean, no doubt. So I agree with that sentiment.
Sure. And before I let you get to your last one too, even if he does have a repeat of last year, I think it's just important still you have that guy eating innings, right? That's still going to be really nice for you, because that gets you through a regular season. And that's, I mean, you're getting a 4 pitcher production out of him, right?
Yeah.
I don't think that's something. I don't think that's ridiculous to say. I mean, you're getting pretty similar production as you would have most number 4 pitchers, not like a good number 4 pitcher, but an above average guy, I would say. But if he does pitch well enough to earn a playoff start, that is a game changer, because I think you look at the last few years, and I love Suarez and Sanchez are like 2 of my favorite Phillies right now. I love those guys. Probably 2 of my favorite players on the team in the past 4 or 5 years, honestly. But the thing with them has been, and Suarez not so much, because as we've gotten deeper into the playoffs, you've seen Thompson give him a longer leash and allow him to go 5 innings. But you do lean on your bullpen a lot with those two on the mound, especially Sanchez's first playoff start. Didn't go the best. It could have gone worse, but I think with him, it was tough because he forgets how many outs there are and doesn't get the double play, and that could have changed that game too. But point being, I think Sanchez only went 2 2/3 in that game. And that's the situation you were in with Syndergaard the year before, which was, all right, we just want Syndergaard to go one time through the lineup. If Taijuan Walker does well enough to earn a playoff start this year, you're talking about a guy who can go 5-6 innings for you in that start, ideally. I mean, I'm not saying he's going to pitch well. Excuse me. I'm not saying he's going to pitch well in that playoff start, but I certainly think there's potential for that. So I think that could solve another problem for you later in the season. I'm not saying that's going to happen. I personally don't expect them to pitch well enough to earn that start over Christopher Sanchez as of right now. And I think Christopher Sanchez will earn enough trust this year to where he gets 3 to 4 innings in a playoff start, maybe 5. But that's just another caveat I have to that. Sorry, I know you got your third one, but just wanted to add that before we go. Because again, like we've talked about, all of this is about the playoffs, right? It's about experimenting and figuring out what the best formula is come playoff time. Yeah,
actually, it's kind of funny you were just talking about that. My third concern is, what if Sanchez does not live up to the hype that he has around him? Because, like I said, our pitching depth is not like thin, but it's not great. I mean, no team has 8 great starters just sitting around waiting to be used.
Yeah.
But I think if Sanchez lives up to the hype, we're in for we could win 100 games. I mean, we're a 100-win team if we have things go the right way for us. But I think if he doesn't live up to the hype, you could see us really struggle at times trying to get innings 8 by the rotation. And like you said, 170 innings from Taijuan last year was very valuable, even if he wasn't great for all 170 of them. And yes. I think Sanchez is probably going to get to around that number this year, 170, 180 innings, which would be his most by, I believe, 30 or 40. So I think if he doesn't live up to the hype, we're probably in trouble at some point this year. And it would be kind of like a question mark going into the playoffs then, as far as the fourth starter.
Mm-hmm. Right. And then you're going into the deadline. It's the same situation as the last 3 seasons since Dombrowski has gotten here, to where he's had to acquire Kyle Gibson. He's had to acquire Noah Syndergaard, and he had to acquire Michael Lorenzen. So you're then looking for another guy similar to that, but maybe you're looking for a guy who's a little bit better than them, who can start that fourth playoff game, because if Taijuan does the same thing again, maybe you don't trust him in that regard. So those two kind of, honestly, our last 2 concerns, interestingly enough, kind of go hand in hand, in that if Taijuan pitches well and Sanchez doesn't, that still kind of could take care of the fourth playoff starter spot. But if it's, Sanchez doesn't perform well and you get the same season from Taijuan, you're looking for maybe a little bit of a bigger acquisition at the deadline, and maybe someone who is still on those first 6 years in arbitration or pre-arb, who might be a little bit cheaper, that you don't have to spend too much money-wise to acquire or take on. Nothing too crazy to take on, but you don't want to be in that situation. You want to be in a situation where you're more comfortable with your team, and maybe you're just adding like a depth starter or a long man or something of that nature, or another bullpen guy. But yeah, that's kind of what I got on that.
Yeah, I think our third concerns kind of like play off each other a little bit, because the back half of the rotation is, whether anybody likes to admit it or not, is just as important as the front end, because 162 games, your first 2 pitchers can't pitch all 162, and you need your third, fourth, and fifth guys to be serviceable at least. And I think our rotation definitely has one of the higher upsides in the league, because Ranger, you could get a 2-something ERA from him if everything goes right for him, or you could get a 4.5 ERA. You never really know, but I think our back half of the rotation is going to play a key part for us this year, just in general, whether it be Taijuan, Ranger, or Sanchez, and whoever else may come along to fill innings throughout the season.
Definitely. Yeah. And I want to get to a comment here too that kind of goes off of that as well, and Ben says, or go get Jordan Montgomery and say F the luxury tax and win a World Series. And that's certainly not impossible if Jordan Montgomery is willing to go take a short-term deal. I personally would not be a big fan of signing him to a long-term deal. And we've talked about this a little bit before. And I think there's good reason for that. But I think on that note, I think you see again, with the way they've kind of gone about this offseason and with who's available next offseason too, I think they're probably going to go over it next year. And I mean, the Wheeler extension shows you that they're already, I think they're already going to be over, if I'm not mistaken, just with that alone. So, we'll see what happens with Soto, Juan Soto, that is. That'll be interesting. I'm not going to get into that now because it's really not anything to talk about until he becomes a free agent, but something to keep an eye on. Roki Sasaki, if he comes over, obviously that's a guy to keep an eye on too. Like, there are names next year. And this year's free agency class wasn't that great. You still do have a couple guys out there as well, but I could certainly see them just blowing through it next year. Like, they're already going to be over it, but I think next year is the year they're going to blow through it. And I think, you do want to keep that draft slot this year too. People are going to say it doesn't matter because you're competing. They're still trying to build up the farm to get to a level of the Dodgers or Astros to where you can trade assets when you need to. You can still have assets in the farm when you need to. Like, it's not going to happen overnight. So I think you still need to focus on that. And 10 draft slots is a big difference too.
Yeah. Yeah. It's not as big of a difference if you're picking 29th or 30th because the pickings are already slim as far as first round picks go then. But I mean, 10 slots is a lot, whether anybody wants to look at it that way or not, because look at the Mets last year. I mean, they had that record payroll and it didn't work out for them. And they lost 10. They went from, I think, 8th to 18th. I mean, that is a massive difference. I mean, we're obviously not looking to be picking 8th, but I think the 10 slots is like, it's something they didn't want to do this year because they haven't really had their full allotment of draft picks in the last handful of years because of qualifying offers for free agents. And I think that's one of the main reasons you won't see them even entertain picking up Blake Snell because they want to have their full allotment of picks this year. And I think, like you said, if they go over the tax next year, the third tax, they're going to blow through it. I mean, they're going to spend a lot of money. You could see them be up like $350 million payroll. I mean, it could be crazy if they get a couple short-term deals that are high AAV.
And hopefully when Sasaki signs here next offseason, he defers all his money to the last till the end of his contract. That would be nice. But I think they will eventually go over the tax though. And also, like, I think it is important to keep in mind too. And also want to say hi to Luke, Nerio, Zach, Jonathan, Jose, Omarlin, everyone who hopped in here just now. We appreciate you guys. And we'll get some of your questions here too as we go into the back half of this podcast. So keep dropping questions and comments. But I also want to say, too, I think a lot of people do get frustrated that obviously the fans have come out to the games. They're buying jerseys. They're buying tickets. They're buying food, right? The Phillies are not short on money right now. That is for sure. I mean, they're definitely doing well in that regard. I'm not in the building, so I'm not going to act like I know how much they should and shouldn't spend. But I think there are a lot of times where fans say, well, don't tell me they can't go over the third luxury tax and that they don't have enough money, because they definitely do. And again, it's about being strategic as far as when you do it, for one. And two, you also have to keep in mind, you have the Red Sox over here who won't even go over like the second threshold, I think, or the first threshold. And we're very lucky to be in a situation to where we're talking about that as well. And I also think it's important to remember too, Matt Klentak screwed this farm up so bad that we just had to spend that much money as well to where we're at this third luxury tax. Maybe if the farm had been a little bit better, the development staff had been a little bit better, we wouldn't have had to spend this, and now we'd be going, have some more money and some more room until that third luxury tax because other spots will be filled. So those are two things I kind of wanted to mention on that as well. I think I wasn't picking on Ben, who just commented about Jordan Montgomery, but I feel like I see that a lot, and it's like we are very fortunate to be Phillies fans in a situation where they have spent a lot of money and they're building up the farm to be better right now. The farm's still getting there, but they're doing it the right way now.
Yeah, I think you kind of hit the nail on the head right there at the end, actually. Like, from what it was 5 or 6 years ago, our farm system is 5 times as good. I mean, there was nothing coming up other than like Reese and Nola are the only major contributors from the last half decade. Other than like recently, Bohm and Stott are obviously very good major league players. But from when Klentak had the farm system all depleted, I mean, the Phillies had nothing. They had their first round draft pick in Nola, and I believe Reese was a first round pick as well, right?
Reese was a 5th round pick, actually, believe it or not.
Really? Okay. Yeah. Mm-hmm. I admittedly, I have said this before, but I've only been watching the Phils since like 2018, and I I have a lot to learn, obviously, and I'm still learning every day. But
We all are.
yeah, but as far as the luxury tax, like you said, we're very fortunate. I mean, there's only I think one or two teams ahead of us in payroll,
Yeah.
so it's not just like they can go out there and sign a new guy to a $20 million contract every couple weeks. It's not realistic.
Right.
And also, like you said before, the farm it it's not great, but it's a lot better than it used to be, and you have to be able to pick from it whenever you need to. And the Phillies, it doesn't seem like they're too comfortable doing that right now. I mean, like they went out the last couple of years and picked up starting pitchers at the deadline, which they needed to do. They didn't really have a choice. But I think the more that the farm builds, and that's why they're not going over this year. They want to build the farm for the next few years and have these major league contributors coming up from the minor leagues in the next 4 or 5 years. I think that's a big reason why you see them picking like high school bats like Aiden Miller and Justin Crawford, because
Yes.
they want these guys to be ready in a couple years, not next year. I think they like the project type players, and they've done that in the past, I believe. I don't know exactly, but
Yep.
I think a big thing they like is for this year is to have all their picks and be comfortable going into next year, going over the tax and losing some picks. Because if you're going well over the luxury tax, you're probably going to sign some guys that have qualifying offers tied to them. So you're going to be losing draft picks on top of moving back 10 spots. So
Correct. Yeah. I don't have anything to add to that. I mean, again, like you said, they've very much like the high school bats and arms. I mean, obviously Abel and Painter were both high school guys too. And you even go back to when Moniak was drafted and Cornelius Randolph was drafted. I mean, two guys who really never played significant reps for the Phillies, especially Randolph. He never really ended up playing for the Phillies at all in the big leagues. But two guys who were both high school bats as well. And they took them very high in the draft, even when they were, I think they were, well, Moniak, they were obviously number one, but I believe Randolph was seventh or something of that nature. So, or around that spot. So, yeah, to your point, they do like those guys, and they're trying to build the farm for the future right now. But maybe back then it would have been nicer to get some of the college guys to accelerate that rebuild a little bit.
right.
But there's no like right and wrong way to do it, because there's always talent at both spots, whether college or high school. It's a tough decision to make. The MLB draft, I think, it's such a different dynamic from other drafts, and it's really hard. Hockey is the other one that's really different too. But yeah, with that said, I want to get to this other question by Luke. He says, what do we think of Nola so far through spring? Well, his first start looked pretty good. The box score from the last two has not looked all that good. And, that's not what you want to see. But again, I think in spring, if you're a hitter, you're trying out different swing mechanics and all that. As a pitcher, you're trying out some new things here and there too. So again, I'm not going to overreact to it. We've seen Wheeler in past years not pitch well in the spring. I know with Nola, it's obviously a little elevated with the fan base because of what we've seen from Nola throughout his career in Philadelphia, which is either he's locked down or he gives up 4 runs pretty early on, right? There's really no in between with him. And when he implodes, it's not usually very good. So I'm not too concerned just yet. And I think he's going to get that opening day start. I think you're going to see him look just fine there. We'll see how he does as the season goes along. But as far as the spring goes, I'm not super concerned right now.
Yeah, I'm not very concerned either. And the last start, I think was it yesterday?
Yeah, I think it was yesterday.
Yeah, I think I saw a couple different people. I think Alex Carr, maybe Alex Coffey as well, said that one of the balls that scored 2 RBIs, it was like a ball between second and or third and shortstop, and it went off Rodolfo Castro's glove, and it probably could have been an error. But like I said in the last couple pods, they're scoring everything hits nowadays. Yeah. So those were earned runs whenever they maybe shouldn't have been. So I don't look too much into spring results, because it's kind of like prospects where they're trying new things every time they go out there, and if it doesn't work, it doesn't work. I mean, I think we saw Wheeler throwing a new pitch, a splitter, right?
Yes, very exciting.
Yeah, that's kind of another storyline of spring. I don't think we've touched on that actually.
No,
but
very,
I think yeah, he seems like he's really confident in it. Like if he feels like it could really elevate his game, I think he said, and he said hopefully that gets me to a Cy Young. Yeah. And I think a pitch like that, it absolutely could, because you're seeing the splitter come back a lot more right now, actually. And I know last year it was kind of like the cutter revolution, where a lot of guys were throwing cutters. Seems like this year a lot of guys are starting to throw splitters now. But you saw, like we're talking about Nola right now, he started throwing a cutter last year. And it seems like this spring so far, that's been a big pitch for him. I think he's using it a lot more, and it looks a little bit better as far as movement goes. So maybe he tweaked it this offseason.
Sure. Yeah. And to speak to the splitter a little bit too, I mean, you have these guys coming over from Japan now and Senga and Yamamoto, and there's
Yeah,
so many different splitters over there that I can see why it's kind of catching on over here. So that's cool to think about how that like the Japanese game is kind of impacting the American game over here too.
yeah.
I want to get to this comment too. How many good years do you guys think JT has left in him? I mean, I'm hoping like the rest of his contract plus what I think he's a free agent in 2026. So that plus maybe another year or two. Like if he can have 3 more good years, I think that would be awesome. And after that, like even while he's declining, I'm still hoping that he's going to be good enough to where it's not a major issue either.
Yeah, I think he has, like you said, through the end of his contract. I feel okay about it. But if he ends up coming back or whatever it may be, because our farm system has good catching in it, and I think after his contract, you might see them just say,
Yeah.
hey, appreciate what you did, but see ya. And I I don't know. I feel like JT, it's all kind of hinging on this year how people are going to feel about him because he had his down year last year, which was still like a top 5 catching season last year. But I think he's got a couple good years left in him. I mean, as far as defense goes, he was still good defensively last year, but his framing was actually like bottom of the league, I believe. I don't I don't think that has much to do with how many good years you have left, but
Sure.
it's a big part of catching nowadays. But I think if his offensive numbers come back up this year, I think everybody will kind of feel good about him like they did going into last year.
Mm-hmm. Definitely. Yeah. And to your point, you have 3 years now. You would hope by the end of those 3 years, Eduardo Tai is a guy who maybe at that point, I don't know if he'll be quite ready yet, but if you do re-sign JT to like a 1 year or like a 1-and-1 option type of deal, that by the time that comes around, you can mix him in enough to where he's playing enough games and then getting some reps. And then maybe by the second year of an extension or something like that, that he's starting to get the majority of the reps there. But again, that's something that's far into the future. So I guess we'll kind of see where that goes, but plenty of time to figure that out. Well, we got 10 people in here too. I just want to say we have our Discord. You guys can always check when we're going live on there. We're always announcing it in there, and we got 10 people in here. Appreciate all y'all who are watching right now. And yeah, if you're not in our Discord, let me know. We can put the link in the chat real quick too. But yeah, just wanted to announce that real quick. And yeah, keep an eye on our community tab too. We always announce stuff there. So yeah, we appreciate all you guys who are watching right now. And Calvin, thank you. Good to see you in here, a loyal subscriber. We always enjoy your comments and questions. So
Yeah, we appreciate all you guys. It makes us feel good whenever you guys are in here talking to us. We sometimes it's not like it doesn't work out. Everybody's not around, but Friday nights seems like kind of like a good night for everybody. So I think we're gonna keep going Friday nights. Seems like.
Yep. Yeah, and I was talking to Drew about it too. We'll see what we can get going before opening day, but I think we're both going to be itching for opening day, so you can expect a good number of streams in the days leading up to opening day that week. So that'll be fun. But obviously, for right now, we still got some time till we get to that. But Luke asks, how should we feel for Johan Rojas for this upcoming season? I'm excited to see how his hitting has developed for the offseason. Yeah, and like I said before, we have talked about this a lot, Drew. So we don't have to dive too much into it. But yeah, again, it comes down to if he can hit 220, 230 with how good he is defensively and with platinum glove caliber defense, that could be enough, especially if he adds the power to it too, with the muscle he's added. If you can get him to, still like a 720, 730 OPS maybe with that, I think you're still in a good spot. And we've talked about him a lot, like I said. So I don't know if there's anything you want to add to that we haven't talked about in past podcasts.
Yeah, I think you kind of hit the nail on the head as far as like what his hitting numbers probably should look like if he's going to be a major leaguer this year. But I mean, as far as like the big outlook, I think if he plays 150 games or whatever it may be, you're not going to play 162, obviously. But if he plays 150 games, he could, no doubt about it, win a platinum glove this year. And that would be just a guy like that adds so much value to the team throughout a full season. Like, I think everybody can feel good about Johan going into the season.
Definitely. Yeah. There was one more I wanted to get to here. One more comment. I did think that before I got to the other one, I did think this was funny. Nerio says, the thing with Walker is sometimes things simply just don't work. That's life. Certainly, that's the truth, man, for sure. But Hopefully that's not the case this year, but that is life sometimes. I mean, sometimes things just don't work out how you plan.
Yep.
But
You do have a good
Jonathan,
point.
yeah, Jonathan makes a great point on our topic of Sanchez and Walker, and I think this is a good way to wrap up here. He says, we saw, and we've talked about this before, Drew, we saw how bad the beginning of last season was with bullpen games. And you don't want to be in that situation again. You really don't. So I think we're all hoping that, right? That we're not going to be watching guys in the bullpen, out of the bullpen again, pitching an inning or two. And that also is probably a reason why, you had a lot of those guys in the bullpen. Maybe they were a little fatigued as the year went on, especially some of the guys who got hurt or some of the guys who had pitched a lot come playoffs. That could have been part of it too. So just having that extra depth too, even in a guy like Turnbull, even if he doesn't pitch great, just having guys who can eat those innings already with the club so that you can avoid those bullpen games early in the season, I think that's a big impact.
Yeah, I think kind of like you said, having that extra depth is very, very important. And like this year, a little bit different than last year. It feels like Abel is right on the cusp of being ready. So that kind of gives you another option for depth as far as the rotation goes. And I mean, yeah, the bullpen games were brutal last year, but I think you could survive if you had to do a couple, because every team does throughout the year. Your starter gets hurt in the first inning or something like that might happen. But I think the bullpen this year is going to be a lot more rested going into the back half of the season because of the rotation depth that we've built, which that's something that doesn't really get talked about a lot. Like the Phillies have extremely good rotation depth as far as how most major league teams are, because you look at the Braves, I mean, they're considered the best team in the NL pretty much unanimously, other than maybe the Dodgers now. But the Braves, you've seen in the last couple playoffs, they don't have rotation depth. I think we've talked about that. But yeah, it's got to be discouraging for Braves fans to know that if one of their top starters get hurt, like they're in trouble.
Definitely. No, yeah, like you said, I think we're both in agreement on that. We talked about that before. It's concerning if you have, I mean, you saw it last year. Charlie Morton went down. They have Bryce Elder starting the third game, and it went about as good as you could expect it to go for the Phils. That's for sure. So only other comment we really didn't get to was shout out on Marlin. Shout out Michael Mercado, man. I mean, he's going to be interesting this year. Definitely has some interesting stuff. I think he's probably going to start the year in the minors, but he's flashed some interesting potential this spring. I think he's throwing up to 99, and he's got a 91 mile an hour cutter slider. I think they're categorizing it as a cutter, but point being, yeah, interesting little prospect there to keep an eye on. So, anything else you wanted to say, Drew, about him or anyone else before we sign off?
Yeah, Michael Mercado. Actually, I was talking to, I believe it was Alex Carr the other day, who we're going to have on the show next week. Actually, good caveat there.
Yeah,
next week. I think it's Thursday. We're going to do it, but we're going to have Alex on the show, and he's going to talk some prospects with us, I believe. So that'll be exciting. Everybody make sure you tune in for that, because Alex is a great Phillies mind as far as prospects go, and even the major league team, obviously. But Alex is a good guy. But
yes.
I was talking to him about Mercado the other day, and he said he kind of looks for them to maybe send him to the minor leagues for the beginning of the year and like let him build his confidence, kind of like you saw them do like with Kirkering last year. They didn't put him there to build his confidence, but to see what he had. And whenever he came up, his confidence was probably like sky high. You kind of want them to be feeling good when they come to the show. You don't want to just throw them into the fire.
Definitely. No, I'm with you on that, Drew. I think it's going to be interesting to see how he develops and if he can kind of have a similar arc to where obviously Kirkering was a known prospect going into the year, but can Mercado be one of those guys to rise through the system and then by the end of the year be one of those secret weapons for us as the year moves on and we go into the playoffs? Maybe he will be. I don't know. But yeah, guys, we'll have Alex Carr on next week at some point, which is exciting. Shout out to Drew for setting that up. Very exciting. And I'm looking forward to talking to him. I've obviously kept up with his tweets throughout the past couple of Philly seasons, which has been nice to stay informed on the team, and not so nice at other times when the team hasn't been doing well and there's not a lot of good things to talk about. But it's always been good seeing Alex giving his opinions, whether good or bad. So we're excited to have him on the show. And it's an exciting way to lead into next week's podcast. So thank you guys for watching. We appreciate y'all. God bless y'all. Go Phils, and we'll talk to you guys the next time. Peace.
Have a good night, guys.